At this time, we're going to go back to 8.0, which is reports and action items from executive session. Do I hear a motion to approve 6 certified recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair, I move the board accept the 6 certified recommendations as recommended by Dr. Little and the senior leadership team for the 2020-2021 academic school year.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Powers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Are there any questions or comments, board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries and it is unanimous. Do I hear a motion to approve 1 administrative recommendation for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair, I move the board accept the 1 administrative recommendation by Dr. Little and the senior leadership team for the 2020-2021 academic school year.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Powers. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Are there any questions or comments, board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and once again, it's unanimous. We now are going to talk about a property contractual matter related to a bus transportation facility. Do I hear a motion that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the purchase of 2 pieces of property per an agreement dated February 19th, 2020 with Royal Properties LLC and Royal Holdings One LLC?
Madam Chair, I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the purchase of 2 pieces of property per an agreement dated February 19th, 2020 with Royalty Properties LLC and Royalty Holdings One LLC. The properties are known by Lexington County as TMS number 005498070015 and TMS number 005498070014. The consideration for this property is $1,500,160. This total equates to $32,000 per acre.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, we now have a motion and a second on the floor, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Salters. He'll walk us through this property purchase, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Mr. Salters?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm just going to give you a brief highlight of the property. As you recall, in the 2018 bond referendum, one of the duties we were tasked to complete was to relocate our bus transportation facility, the Lexington Hub. And so some considerations when doing that, we're looking for a piece of property to be able to do that. We're looking for a central location to be able to consolidate Lexington, River Bluff, and White Knoll service areas into one service area to get some economies of scale. Currently, the White Knoll buses run off of the White Knoll High School property, which is obviously very busy, and we certainly can use the space at White Knoll High School as we continue to expand that facility with a 32 classroom addition and a performing arts center as well. The property consideration with this particular piece of land, it's roughly 4.1 miles from White Knoll High School, 6.9 from Lexington, and 8.7 from River Bluff. Ideally, we would look for an industrial area, which this property is located in. It's primarily because of our buses and the disturbance that they potentially cause early in the mornings with startup, sometimes as early as 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And obviously, we want good sight distances for our employees and buses to have safe access to our facility. And just a quick rundown, we have 190 state buses currently in the district. We've actually, over the last 2 years, or including this year, we'll have received 11 new buses from the state. 10 of those buses will be located or operate out of this proposed lot. So that's 152 buses. And then we have 21, if you go back to 2016, we had 21 district-owned buses, activity buses we use for field trips, ball games, that kind of thing. And we have increased that number to 49. That number had been 21 for a number of years, and as our schools grew, even when we opened River Bluff High School and kept bringing on middle schools, we didn't keep up with the number of field trips and sports activities that were going on. So we focused on that over the last few years. That number's at 49. So we anticipate a total of approximately 196 buses will operate out of this lot. And of course, the associated employees will park at this lot as well. So it's, close to 400 vehicles on this lot at one time. This is our current facility. You've got Highway 1 up here, and Bar Road runs this way, and we are co-located with the Lexington area bus maintenance facility, and this is a zoomed-in view of that facility. This is the Lexington-only buses, so the White Knoll buses are a similar size and group, and so this area down at the bottom here is the Lexington group, and then this is the state maintenance operation. And so we run basically out of 3 portable classrooms that are circa 1980s, some maybe even the 70s, and are not adequate for the resources that we need to use there. Looking at the piece of property that we're proposing, this is obviously I-20 you can see here. So this is, South Lake Drive. We've got Two Notch Road that runs here. Michelin would be back in this area back here. And so we have access, across Two Notch back over to the Lexington attendance area. We've got access over to the River Bluff attendance area, either via the interstate or several of these back road connectors here. And obviously the White Knoll community right here on South Lake. And the properties adjacent to this is the Bentley Pontoons. There's a large joint municipal water tower that's actually right underneath that arrow. Here's a zoomed in view of that property. The first track is this little area right here, which provides us an ingress to the property with good sight lines and visibility. And then we have 2 other egress points. It's actually a little skewed. That line should be, more straight there. And so that will be a future access point. We're proposing to use this as our egress point for the traffic. And you see the topography. So the property generally slopes from right to left on this view and feeds down into a draw here, a wetland area, which is delineated here. Approximately 2.5 acres of wetland that we will not disturb as part of the development of this proposed building and parking areas. This is a rendering, kind of a 3D modeling of the facility and the driveway access to it. Again, the main entrance would be here. Employee out in the front of the facility. Our buses would have the opportunity to drive to the rear of the facility. We will have some fueling stations. We do have some propane buses, and we also obviously have diesel buses, and they will have fueling stations along in this area, covered fueling stations. And the parking lot is designed so that they can, make their way to the back and then easily feed into these parking bays. And then an exit bay here. All of this asphalt will be heavy-duty asphalt, which is required for our buses to maintain the integrity of that surface with the frequent driving and turning that will occur. And then the building itself will be more centrally located here. And this is a shot of the front elevation of the building. It's very similar in layout to our current operations building. We kind of modeled it after that. And we have office spaces in the front of the building, and then in the rear of the building, operations, we have a large warehouse. In this scenario, we have mechanic bays and wash bays for our drivers to maintain our bus fleet. This is a schematic layout of the proposed office areas here in the front. We've got some flex space here in the middle, much like we do at our operations facility. A training, staff development space here, seating for about 100 people. We're proposing 4 mechanic bays, and then 4 washdown bays. And these would be covered bays. This is just a rendering of what the staff development room might look like from a 3D modeling perspective. There's a conference room in the front, and you can see the flex space kind of opened up in the back there. And this is that flex space, what it could potentially look like, all the way down to the Lexington 1 mission statement on the wall. And then just to recap again, this is the location of the property. And I would just remind you that our process is you give us through a formal action, you give us the authority to go seek out property, which you did. Then you enter into an option agreement, which you did. And you then authorize us to get appraisals on a piece of property. And we have 90 days to ratify a price on that property, which we did. And that's where the $32,000 an acre came from based on 2 independent appraisals. And this would be the final vote that you would take to move to close the property, and we'd actually move about purchasing it. And should you take that vote this evening, we will close the property as quickly as possible and start the process of permitting with the county and get a land disturbance permit as quickly as we can and go ahead and get construction underway with the goal of being open for next school year operating off of this facility. Happy to answer any questions that you may have related
Board,
to it.
do we have any questions for Mr. Salters?
I have some discussion. First off, thank you all for getting us the due diligence on Friday. I appreciate not getting that the night of the meeting. With that being said, I have read every single page inside of this binder. There are a couple of items I'd like to point out to the board. Originally, we were told we needed between 15 and 20 acres. The district brought us 1 parcel of land for 44 acres and an additional parcel for 2.61 acres. Nothing has changed. We still only need between 15 and 20 acres. As a matter of fact, the site layout shows us that less than half of this land will be used. The property listing says it can be subdivided, but yet we aren't. As for the 2.61 acres, page after page in this binder talks about recognized environmental conditions. So much potential contamination existed that additional assessment of the site was warranted. There's documented contamination on adjoining property, and the surrounding property has land use restrictions consisting of no residential use, no groundwater use, no agricultural use, no child care or elderly care facilities, and no school use. All of that information was in a report dated July the 8th. A few weeks later, in a report dated August the 20th, after additional assessment of the property was done by the same agency, they revealed that, surprisingly, there was no evidence of USTs, underground storage tanks, septic tanks, or water supply wells. But a few weeks earlier, they, and I'm quoting here, "We observed multiple water supply wells on the subject property. We observed 2 vent pipes, likely associated with former underground storage tanks that were utilized at the Kaiser grocery business. And according to the property owner, a septic system is present on the subject site, although they could not locate the septic system." The original report also included pictures of the vent pipes, 1 water supply well, and a view of the septic connection. Why are we, as a board, spending all of this money on a site that only serves as a driveway? I know we were told DOT said we needed it, but DOT also said that we had to have 2 entrances for the land on Old Cherokee for Lexington Middle School. But when that wasn't possible because 1 parcel of land fell through, we made it work with 1 entrance. Even so, when a price couldn't be negotiated, the district went back and asked the landowner to purchase just enough land for a driveway. There's no reason why that can't be done here as well. But if y'all are just insistent on buying additional land for a driveway, there's a lot for sale right next to the driveway in the layout. And that landowner, from what we discussed earlier, has not been contacted, and that land has not been discussed. So if that isn't enough to convince you that we don't need the additional 2.61 acres, In addition to documented environmental hazards, we can add demolition and cleanup fees because there are abandoned homes and hazardous substances on site. And oh, let's not forget, a business and a home. We would be bulldozing someone's livelihood and someone else's home. I just want to say this land is not included in bond referendum money. Every yes vote on this board tonight is taking something away from someone. I do not understand why we keep buying land that we do not need and overpaying for land. So with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to divide the question and vote on each piece of property separately.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Garris to divide the two pieces of property into two votes. Does Ms. Garris have a second? Okay, the motion fails. Are there any other questions or comments, Board? I have a couple of questions. Mr. Salters, tell us, how did you find this land? Because I don't remember.
Madam Chair, we did an extensive search of the area in which we reviewed multiple tracts of land with the board. And I'm not going to identify them right now, but we reviewed tracts of land across I-20, closer to the Lexington area. We reviewed tracts of land down South Lake Drive, and we reviewed this tract of land and other tracts of land on Two Knots Road. This tract of land actually had a for sale sign on it, and that's how it came to my attention. After, I study the Lexington County GIS, and identify potential properties. Then we go out and ride and look at the properties, and as I rode by this site, there was a for sale sign on the property.
Okay, thank you. And since Ms. Garris did bring up the question about the DOT requirements for two driveways, can you walk us through that?
We did a site assessment and traffic impact study with SCDOT and our civil engineer, and the layout that was presented, I'll just go back to this layout right here. This layout is the agreed upon layout that was the most cost effective and safe layout determined by DOT in cooperation with our civil engineer. And I did want to make one point of clarification. The Lexington Middle School site actually does have two entrances to that site. Ms. Garris said there was one entrance. We were actually trying to get a third entrance to that campus, just as a point of clarification.
Okay. Any other questions, Board?
Yes, so thank you. So we were told that we had to buy the second piece of property for LMS for an additional entrance, I guess I should say. But come to find out, they were saying we needed one on a back road, Cherokee Trail, that they couldn't all be on Old Cherokee, but we found out that wasn't true. So I'm just not buying it, that we need this additional property here. And when he mentioned the most cost effective, well, here's what the board needs. The board needs all of these options in front of us. Then we decide what's cost effective and what works, and we have figures in front of us. Instead of, here's our one option, here's what's gonna work. We were presented with one piece of land, and there were others discussed, but when we came back months ago, and I even took notes back then, one hadn't came up for sale. There was never contact made with the landowner. We didn't get anywhere with negotiations. So at the end of the day, we had one piece of property brought to us. We have one site design, and we're being told that DOT says this is all that can work. And like I said, I'm just not buying it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Garris. Is there anything else, Board? I also want to say this summer I had the opportunity to ride the buses and deliver food, and every bus driver that I rode with is so excited about this. This is such a feather in their cap because where they are now, we have that huge drainage issue. I think they have to walk through so much water, and I think they even have to reposition the buses, you said, when we're having a big rainstorm because the drainage is so poor on that land. And they were all very excited about this. Ms. Green?
Why not? I can just kind of emphasize what Mr. Salter said about the property on Bar Road and those portables that they've been using as offices. I mean, I was a student at Lexington High School in the mid-'80s, and those, I mean, that's like a landmark out there that, and they've not moved or changed or improved in appearance in 35 years. And so I think that an updated, adequate transportation facility is long overdue for what has tripled in attendance size. And so I appreciate the efforts that you've gone to find. I was out at this property on Friday, and I think it's supremely suitable for what we were looking for, so thank you.
And the other thing is, how long do you perceive, or what do you think, how long will we use this site? Because based on Pillion, former high school, now Pillion Middle, Gilbert High School, which now was Gilbert Elementary, how long have we used those pieces of property? And I'll be honest, I foresee this one being exactly just like that.
So a site like this, it will position this district for 50-plus years because there is growth potential on this site. So when we add another 20 buses to this campus, we're not pigeonholed because we don't have enough land to add more parking for the buses or more parking for the employees. And that's the intent of being able to grow the campus as it stands. So this really will position us for, the district for 50 years. I mean, we can expand the building, we can add more parking, more wash bays, more mechanic bays off the back of the building. So there's a lot of flexibility we have on this campus. Additionally, much like we did with the New Providence land, where the district bought a parcel of land, and then at some point recognized that they were not going to use that land, they carved it off and sold the land. If at some point down the road the district decides, you know what, we're never going to grow any bigger, or we don't need this to relocate a maintenance facility or some other facility, it can be subdivided and used for another purpose and sold. I did want to point out that in the due diligence process, we do a phase 1 environmental study, and if there's nothing in the area identified, you don't move to phase 2. In this case, there were several suspect items. Vent pipes are a typical trigger that shows that you might have an underground storage tank. And so we move to a phase 2 environmental study to do due diligence to make sure that hazards that were affecting this development would not impact us. And we got a clear letter from our environmental consultant stating that this facility and this site is safe to develop on and is not going to be a problem. And so that's that process and how that works.
Thank you. Ms.
And
Green?
I just, Mr. Salters, you said something when you were talking about the longevity of this piece that I had not really even thought about. But, 5 years ago, we didn't know that we were going to need a propane filling station at our bus facility.
Correct.
And we don't know if 5, 10, 20 years from now, what sort of fuel sources our buses are going to be using. And I think having some flexibility and some space to grow and adapt that property is not a bad thing, because I felt, it just seems like new technology is growing exponentially. And I think that includes, diesel's been around a long time. And so I just think that there's some potential for some big changes in how our buses are fueled. And so I think that this is not a bad thing to have some extra space.
Well, and I've been on employee relation kicks tonight, whether it's Ms. Gaskins or Mr. Robertson, but I do think when you build a facility that demonstrates respect for that profession, and I think just 2 years ago, we were in this room talking about where we're going to find bus drivers, and we had to start a school year without, quite frankly, enough bus drivers. But y'all did a great job and did the work to hire them. So I do think from an employee retention as well as professional development, this demonstrates our commitment to our bus drivers. So thank you.
I just
Any
have
other questions or
Yeah, a
comments,
couple of
board?
things I'd like to respond to that. Mr. Salters mentioned that we bought more land than needed at New Providence, and then we sold it. If I recall, we paid over $50,000 an acre for that land, and we sold it to Mungo for $30-something thousand an acre. And in phase 2, he said we got site clearance. Well, like I mentioned, they gave us so much site clearance from phase 1 to phase 2 that the pictures they had of septic tanks, water supply wells in phase 2, they said that they couldn't find any of that. So how do things just disappear? There's no evidence of them, but yet there were pictures there in phase 1. And y'all say this is going to last 50-plus years and you can add on to it. Well, if our buildings are maintained, this might just last us 50 years. But as we've seen, we're tearing down, parts of Gilbert Elementary School now, parts of Pillion Middle School.
That were built when Truman and Eisenhower were
Okay,
president.
if they were maintained, they'd still be here for another 50 years. But we need to put maintenance staff in our budget. I mean, these buildings have to be maintained. And, I'm glad the bus drivers are getting new billing. I'm sure they're happy too. As far as professional development and how this makes them feel, imagine how they felt for the last 40 years that they've stood knee-deep in mud to get on their bus when they were parked down at the end of the bus lot. These are things that should have been taken care of years ago, and I'm glad it's happening, but it's happening all over the district. There are needs that still aren't being attended to.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Garris. Anything else, board? Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Oswald. We have a second from Ms. Green. All in favor of the property contractual matter related to the bus transportation facility, purchasing 2 parcels of land from Royal Properties LLC and Royal Holdings 1 LLC, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, so we have 4 in favor and 2 opposed, and the motion carries. And start building, Mr. Salters.